Hello, mentor. Please sit down. I just wanted to ask you, how does it feel to be the GOAT? Hello. Some days it feels pretty good. Hi, this is not at all a recent question, but I'm very curious. What is your top tip on enjoying a video game to the fullest, or maybe the mindset you think is important for that? So this is difficult to answer because it requires specificity I can't always give. Every game is different and provides different reasons to enjoy it or dislike and be frustrated with it. I suppose then my advice is to try your best to find what the best, most confident, or most interesting aspect of any given game you play is, then attempt to play it in ways and under conditions that manifest or engage with that aspect the most. In some games this is easier, because if you play them in a way that doesn't engage with their best aspects, they will simply kill you for it and not allow you to make any progress. But some games are looser and you have to do some of that work yourself. My other piece of advice is to just play and attempt to finish or clear a lot of games. Every game you play raises your total game literacy, which will make you better at other games and let you enjoy more of the medium. Consider trying to play different genres every once in a while as well, including new ones you don't have experience in. Personally, I still haven't played enough games, and I always have blind spots. You got any action figures or statues of Assassin's Creed characters? I do. I have a small statue of Revelations Ezio, and for my birthday one year, a bunch of my friends pulled all their money together to buy me the enormous statue of Altair, crouching on top of the bell tower. If you want to Google for it, it should be called Altair the Legendary Assassin. It's one of my favorite things. I'll simply ask this, is Resynced fun? Does it feel good to play? For the most part, yeah, I would say so. It has issues here and there that you would expect from any Assassin's Creed game, but if you're watching this video, you're likely forgiving enough of the series' overall feel since its beginnings in 2007. It feels alright. It doesn't reach the instant responsiveness of something like AC1 to Rev, but it's also not the sludge fest that Valhalla was. It's kind of in the middle, and clears my bar for acceptable feel. Assassin's Creed can always be smoother, and it should keep striving for that though. Is there an option to center the camera, or is it always over the shoulder? At the time of this recording, I did not find an option to change the default camera position or behavior. What are your favorite and least favorite aspects? My favorite aspects are the reworked combat, which I enjoy more than the original games, and easily the new rope dart. You're going to hear me praising this rope dart a lot in the different videos I release about this game, because for my purposes and utility, it's the best one the series has ever made, and it's not close. My least favorite aspects, I can think of two right now. One is just the limits of what can be done with movement in this current framework and default control scheme. I feel spoiled and selfish for continuing to disparage this because they've improved on everything we've requested again and again, but in the end it still doesn't lead to it being what I actually want. This is where you'll hear some diverging opinions between myself and other players, who may be reasonably happy with it. I think this parkour is once again a step in the right direction, but it still hasn't taken me where I want to be with movement in an Assassin's Creed title. With a foundation built on L3 sprint and a single modifier button, there's only so much you can do even with good remapping, which these games really do provide. I would love to see them take movement back to the drawing board, because you can tell, despite all the improvements over the past 10 years, this current system is aging. You can improve it, you can make it better, but it'll always be constrained by its foundation. Do the difficulty options affect the game noticeably? Do you have an ideal difficulty setting? They really do, which I enjoyed. I have an ideal difficulty setup for myself, and a less sweaty alternative I'll suggest after I outline what all the options do. So first of all, on normal, all difficulty settings attempt to replicate the level of challenge in the original Black Flag. Hard stealth difficulty makes guard perception ranges quite long, and their detection fills become really fast. If you're not high enough above them, they can also see you on shorter rooftops, just like in Shadows on Expert. Hard combat difficulty makes enemies attack you and do their behaviors a bit more often. They'll take bigger chunks out of you if they hit you. It makes your instant takedowns more valuable, so if you're planning on fighting really efficiently and aggressively, hard is a fun way to make that matter more. Like if you want to be rewarded for using your tools and stun states more, this is the way to go. Naval difficulty and activities difficulty affect aspects of the game that do not take place on foot, like ship combat, harpooning, underwater bell dives, and so on. I found hard combat and hard stealth to be satisfying. I'm already used to the original game, and I wanted to keep things fresh for myself. On hard, these systems weren't so difficult that it became overbearing or unpleasant, so I kept it that way for the entire game and enjoyed the new life they breathed into the experience. Naval combat and activities I started with on hard, and I played that way for a while. In time, I found the increased punishment for mistakes could be interesting, but more than anything else, it just slows the experience down a lot. You end up having to board ships too often for healing, which is a fun thing to choose to do from time to time, but needing to do it to every ship in every fight destroys the game's momentum, and I grew tired of that. So in the end I set it back to normal to save time and tedium. It's not that much harder to actually survive encounters on Naval hard if you're willing to slow yourself down enough and constantly board for healing, but in the interest of a smoother game flow, I prefer them on normal. Setting Naval difficulty lower also means your overall Jackdaw upgrade progression will feel faster and smoother, if that's something you care about not spending too much time on. Activities mainly governs the diving bell areas, which are fine on hard, but also harpooning, which is not. Mostly, this just makes it take longer to build up the progression for it, and the individual activity itself takes longer to complete, so again, in the interest of time and flow, I preferred normal. Now, if you've already played the hell out of Black Flag or are looking for a challenge, I do recommend having combat and stealth on hard. I personally find it the most fun that way, and it makes all of our mechanics more meaningful to engage with, which is always something I value in games. If you don't want guards to be able to look up, stealth on normal is fine as well, especially if you want to play a more aggressively sneaky Edward who's running around these spaces at even higher speed. Is the game interested in having Assassin's Creed elements, mechanically or artistically? I mean, yeah, it's ultimately a revisiting of Black Flag, which already had some pretty good presence of Assassin's Creed elements. Experiencing Edward's journey again, seeing him clash with the Assassin Brotherhood, and slowly understand their ideals, having those awesome scenes of himself and Mary discussing the Assassin's Creed together, what the creed means, what makes it compelling to live by and hold in your soul, all of that still hits for me. Edward sneaks, assassinates, and fights the way I would want this kind of assassin to fight, very swiftly and lethally ending enemies in a dance of death. Social stealth sadly doesn't have much more presence than in the original game, which was already little, but it's there from time to time. Parkour I will always have issues with in any game that reuses the foundations of Origins movement, however pretty and improved and tightened up it may become, but it works fine and it's quite fast, which is appreciated. Overall, Black Flag always felt like a good Assassin's Creed game to me, and Resynced is similar. I will say it does add some really cool new moments in modern day especially, which, if you enjoy resisting Abstergo's designs on the world and its people, you will probably appreciate. The final two rifts in particular have gameplay I liked a lot, and there's a pretty hype moment in the final one that uses the Animus in a way I always want the series to do more of, ever since Ezio's games. What are the controls like? Similar to the original? The controls feel like a midpoint between Shadows and Mirage. They're not really much like the original, except naval combat, which is almost identical and felt very good. How robust are the remapping options? Is there any way to map right trigger to be sprint, and in general make the control scheme more like the original? Does the ability UI being on R2 prevent that? Mirage worked pretty well with this, Shadows not so much. Remapping is fairly robust. It's not perfect still, but it's good. I wouldn't recommend remapping right trigger to sprint because it's seemingly hard-coded to Edward's special actions widget in the bottom right, but you can remap right bumper to sprint and figure out where to place everything else after that. I believe Ropatopoulos recommends exactly this in his videos actually, so you can always ask for his advice and thoughts in his comment sections. Resynced looks good. Do you think future games will be like that, or will they just go back to the RPG system? With the trajectory of this series, it's honestly hard to predict what future games can do or are going to do. I assume the team that has enthusiastically produced big RPGs, Quebec, will continue to do so. They're very successful for them, and their specific group of fans seem to love them. As for what other teams will do, I think that'll be a bit more varied and mysterious. I hope we see tighter, more focused games. That's always my wish and desire. For a player who's never played Black Flag but played many of the older games like 1-3 and Rogue, would they be better off playing the original, or do you think this remake does the game justice? This is tough to commit to a conclusion on. Whether this game does Black Flag justice and whether you should still play the original are different things. I would say Resynced is a good game, and it does the original justice in several ways. But it's still true that it's best enjoyed if you've already played Black Flag before, and there are some reasons for that. One is, this game just has a completely different modern-day story and presentation, and some scenes even throughout Edward's story in the historical Caribbean have additions or changes that become more interesting when you contrast them against the original game. Without giving too much away, there's kind of a narrative reason for things being different sometimes, and if you've played Shadows or you know what Ego does, you can kind of guess what's going on. If you don't care so much about that, and you just want to play a modern Assassin's Creed game that's a callback to that older design ethos, similar to Mirage, I suppose, Resynced is fine to play without playing the original. It would hurt me personally, though, and you don't want to do that, do you? Can I just ignore this release and play the original without feeling like I missed out because of the visuals and content changes? Is the extra content good enough to justify rebuying a game I've already played? Because the original is still good. The original is still good, so you can always feel free to just keep playing that. Resynced has new, different modern-day stuff going on, like I mentioned. It has a better combat system than the original. It has a better rope dart than any other game, in my opinion. But if those things aren't compelling you to shell out for it, you're not missing out on too much. It is a revisiting of a game you've already enjoyed. You can just keep enjoying that game, if you prefer. Could this game be the best at anything in the series, not counting naval gameplay of course, atmosphere, combat feel, etc.? Yeah, it has the best rope dart in the series. For some players it might also have the best combat, but this will be a matter of taste. I personally have always valued hyper-lethality on assassin protagonists, and a combat system that lets me swiftly delete enemies when played correctly is something I'll always have praise for. I must also say this game's weather and nighttime are quite good. It might even... Is it fair to say it has better weather than Shadows? I think, like, certainly when you're doing naval stuff, yeah. I've seen many other people talk about resyncing other AC games, such as the Ezio trilogy. Does that idea also make you nervous? In a way, yeah, always nervous about that. That said, the kind of players who would play a remake over the original games are usually not players who would have ever played those original games in the first place, so I wouldn't say we're losing hearts and minds necessarily, as long as the original games remain available to be played. Does the fact that Resynced is separated from the original in the narrative canon hold any weight or influence on potential remakes in the future? Is there a chance that every potential remake from this point on will be canonized in the same fashion? I think it does. While this game is a remake as far as Black Flag is concerned, it is also a sequel to Assassin's Creed Shadows, in that it continues its present-day storyline, which means it is the latest game in the overall Assassin's Creed chronology that started in 2007. I fully expect every single major Assassin's Creed title released from now on to involve themselves with extending or continuing that story set in 2096 that began in Shadows. How do you think Resynced will be indicative of the direction for the next main game? What about the game do you think will stick through to the next game? How Anvil Pipeline works, as well as various teams' visions and interpretations of what Assassin's Creed can be, makes this tough to answer, since they could literally just do anything. What I will say is that I expect the general UI and visual identity of the Animus will remain very similar for many years going forward. So that includes things like the broad strokes of how the player calls or performs actions, but anything else can change. I know this can be controversial, I know some players dislike Ego's UI, but I don't. I think it's cool, and it gets better and more haunting with every passing game that uses it. The sterility of it, the fact that it doesn't fit any particular setting, but is always cold, machine-like, and detached, really pushes for me the sense that we're hacking our access point into the Animus network for activities and functions we were never intended to. The street finds its own uses for things. Google that quote if you want to. I've always seen different animi as being representative of some stage in Assassin's Creed's overall narrative, so basically if we have no reason in the story to swap to a different kind of animus, we probably won't, which means the UI will remain standardized as it has been. Given the story of Shadows and Resynced and how this new animus network is used by the world's population, it doesn't really make sense to be changing and scrapping the UI from game to game, nor is it a responsible use of dev time, I feel, but I'm always open to being wrong. Do you think the sales of this game will determine if we'll get similar treatment for other older titles? Do you think it will determine the style of gameplay if they do indeed make more remakes? I think that whenever a company releases a product, that product's performance will inform decisions on whether they release more in its image to some extent. That's just an understandable conclusion. As for whether it will determine the style of gameplay, I don't really think so, or at least I hope not. The way each individual game plays should be suited to its protagonist and overall structure. For two extreme examples, remaking something like AC1 or remaking something like Unity and having them both play like Resynced just wouldn't really make any sense. It wouldn't be authentic to those games experientially, whereas Resynced genuinely tries and seems to really pride itself on revisiting Black Flag in a way where, when you play it and feel it in your hands, you're like, okay, yeah, for the most part this is Black Flag. It seems AC has now been split into two categories, RPG with Shadows being the newest, and Classic with Resynced being both a remake and a design continuity of Mirage. With what you have seen so far, how hopeful are you that Classic design philosophy devs are able to remake older AC titles and create brand new ones? What I will say is that practice makes perfect. If Ubisoft want to revisit older titles, I think it makes sense to cut their teeth on a remake of a game that straddles the line between the newer era of Assassin's Creed, with crafting, progression, and light RPG elements even back in 2013, while also being a game that is appreciated by old school players who value the simplicity, speed, and lethality of an assassin protagonist who isn't bogged down by stats and synergies. That was always the genius of Black Flag in the first place, after all. The game had its cake and ate it too, by making the grind not be attached so much to your assassin, but be more attached to your ship, which is a vehicle that feels less dissonant to have to spend time improving, and one that isn't expected to do instant kills or reliable stealth takedowns, so that progression doesn't feel like it's robbing anything from you. That's why Black Flag was so smart. That's why no future game has recaptured its elegance, and it's probably why they decided to remake it. It's like the exact middle ground between Progression Creed and Lethal Creed. As for creating brand new, tight, focused, classic-style games, I will always want more of those. Those are my favorite types of Assassin's Creed games, and they are primarily what I advocate for. Do cutscenes preserve your current HUD state? If your HUD is on, will it still be on in cutscenes, or do they script whether Edward has his HUD on or off? If you put your HUD on and enter a cutscene in which Edward is not wearing it, your HUD will come off. If you put your HUD on and enter water, your HUD will come off. One of AC's consistent shortcomings is tutorialization, especially with movement. Does Resynced make an effort to improve on this? With regards to movement, I don't really think so. There is an amusing moment near the end of the game where the Animus puts a gigantic back eject tutorial prompt right in the center of your screen, and the reason it has to do that is because that action is the only way to escape a certain structure you're trapped in, and there is a chance the player has never done a back eject before or even know what it is. Of course, the reason why this is notable is because no such complexity gets taught or highlighted to the player at any earlier point in the game. That's why they have to have it there at the end. So if you're asking, has movement been taught any better or emphasized? Not really. I always treated Kenway movement as kind of the beginning of the end, personally. It was already a big simplification from what we could do in AC1 to Rev, and adapting Edward's parkour to a system that has its foundations and origins was probably not an impossible task, with that considered. How much of the changes to level design improved stealth and parkour compared to the original game? Is the original flow of missions intact, or are there straight up big changes? In this regard, I would say they've improved those parts of play quite a lot. When modern Assassin's Creed level designers are allowed to build density, when they get to build cities, and when they get to work with linear corridor-esque spaces like in certain set-piece missions, they really do shine. Honestly, Assassin's Creed's level designers are kind of like the unsung heroes of these newer games to me, because they're obviously trying to squeeze as much interesting play out of the character's limited moveset and the enemy's available ways to threaten us as they can, even with all the ways higher-ups breathe down their necks. And it works, especially here. I unambiguously enjoy the level design of Resynced more than I do the original Black Flags. We all know the classic Assassin's Creed games are relatively easy in terms of survival. Playing them for proficiency or performance was where the challenge came from, and it's something Ubisoft toyed with back in the day by adding full sync objectives to kind of formalize that. Full syncs were constraints and mid-mission challenges that force you to play a certain way or avoid making certain mistakes. Those are gone in this new game, and instead of this layer of artifice imposed on top of the natural play space, that natural space itself is made harder, more challenging, and more interesting. It's a healthy change and I like it a lot. What this means is that yes, you're not going to be able to finish and route every mission you remember from the original game the same way. Several of them will have more areas, more enemies, blocked off paths, and new or different paths that didn't exist before. Thanks, Ego. How much freedom does Resynced actually give you in mission design? Because full syncs and forced desynchronization as a hard fail state have been removed, Resynced gives you a great deal of freedom in mission design. You can sneak, you can fight, you can go hybrid, kill everyone, kill no one, quite often. That said, Resynced, like many great games, wants to shake up the player experience frequently, so some missions have scripted fights, others are more stealth heavy, and so on. Inside of those contexts though, you can still choose to express yourself in a variety of ways. It's not terribly deep, but it's fun enough. Is there any possibility to enter building interiors like in previous games? Very rarely, so it's in the game, but it's not like an all-the-time thing. Do new additions to gameplay and narrative improve the experience for you? Ship customization, combat overhauls, new narrative stuff especially in the endgame. Does the quality of these additions compare to the original game, specifically the new narrative stuff? The gameplay additions improve my experience greatly, I would say. New rope dart, new combat, jackdaw alt-fire weapons, real difficulty settings being a thing to put the kind of pressure on myself that I want. All of those are almost worth revisiting the game just by themselves for me. The narrative stuff is mixed. Edward talks to himself in this game sometimes, reactive to normal gameplay actions like hunting an animal, looking for a puzzle item, and things of that nature. I wish I could turn that off so fucking badly. It doesn't feel right for Edward as a character to be so loudly introspective, and it's certainly unpleasant to hear sometimes. Sometimes new cutscenes and dialogue are added to extend or add more story to the original game, and most of these are genuinely quite good. However, the original voice acting and the new voice acting by certain characters is noticeably different, and you can feel the seams. Note, I said certain characters. One of those is Edward himself, our protagonist. I personally didn't like that, but I recognize that an actor's voice can change over the years, and it may be an unreasonable expectation to re-record the entire script with his current voice, so the player character you'll spend many hours playing as always sounds consistent. It would have been really appreciated by me, and I'm sure many others though. Now, on the other hand, characters like Blackbeard, Adewale, and Anne Bonny do not really have this issue for the most part. Adewale in particular sounds great throughout the entire game. There are times when I even had difficulty telling what was added dialogue and what was always there for him. That's how consistent and smooth he is. Tristan Dillala is just such a strong actor. The new side stories for the naval officers were good. They were emotional tales with some strong character archetypes I really enjoy. The priest who's trying so badly to be a good man, but the world pushes him again and again until he reluctantly draws upon his inner violence. The girl whose family mistreated her one time too many. And the last one, Dead Man Smith, who became one of my favorite characters in the entire game, even in the short time we spent with him. I can't say almost anything about him because everything about him is a spoiler, but his sad, quiet, and when necessary, ruthless outlook on the world really made me connect with him. Noteworthy as well is that Resynced adds a new modern-day story. These are both simulations of what might have changed if Edward and the lives around him took different paths, but they're also firmly tied to the modern day of this new era of AC, which started in Shadows. And I have to say, Resynced's modern day just eats Shadows' modern day alive. It is so much better. It has more content, you can get the content way faster, and the gameplay and story in the playable rifts is dramatically better and more engaging if you care about Abstergo, the Assassin Brotherhood, the ways control is exerted on humanity in this new era. I came away from Resynced relatively satisfied with modern day, even with its restrictions, which was not something Shadows managed to give me. The Desmond saga is still unsurpassed, and it will likely stay that way for a long time, with how this era of the series has decided to structure its modern day and the limitations it's working within. Not ever leaving the Animus does very strictly define the boundaries of what they're able to do. Like, we're probably not gonna assassinate Abstergo personnel in the real world, which I so badly would love to see given it's 2096 now. But on the other hand, they seem to have the balls to do a lot more extreme things inside of the Animus network, which I hope continues and I hope actually intensifies even further. Any changes to the upgrade system? Do we still have to spam the button to craft things repeatedly like darts, like the bone economy? You upgrade Edward by hunting animals and spending their materials on your pistols, health bar, dart capacities, and effect durations, and smoke bombs, just like in the original game. Hunting is better here. You no longer craft darts personally, you just refill them like other tool ammo from shops. And that means you don't have to mash and spam button presses to remake them. This also means bones are no longer used for crafting ammo at all, which leaves them as a special currency or mechanism that lets you convert into other materials you need to speed up your crafting process. Your ship you upgrade pretty much the same way as the original game. I actually don't think there are any changes to that, which is fine because it worked perfectly okay already. Some of the numbers are different, some of the tuning is different, the kinds of resources different enemy ships can carry can be different, so the overall curve is smoother, but the core behind it all is like the same, which is great. Can we still assassinate animals or will be forced into combat to hunt them? I assassinated nearly every animal I ever killed. You can also still sleep dart them and walk up and loot them, just like in the original. It's smooth, fast, and comfy, no wasting time. I've been curious since the dive anywhere mechanic was shown if you can actually manual dive and access the underwater diving belt areas without one. Dive anywhere is just fancy wording for what you can do in modern AC games released since Origins. If there's water deeper than you can stand up in, your character can just start swimming. Diving wherever you want as long as you have enough breath left to stay safe. Resynced is the same, it's just that there's a whole lot more water all over the game world to do this in, understandably. They often hide chests and stuff underwater, and it can be a cool way to reposition against enemies. The entrances to certain clearable map locations like caves or pirate lairs are also underwater, and you'll have to find them yourself and swim through to the other side. There is a maximum depth you can dive to when you're above a diving bell location, with an Animus memory wall stopping you if you try to go too far down. So you do actually need the diving bell because it's essentially loading you into a separate map, one of the only times this game does that. Is exploration more engaging, or are we still collecting generic chests and empty islands without any resistance or variety? I think exploration is generally more engaging, but it's still Assassin's Creed. You're still mostly collecting generic chests. They do some things to make it more enjoyable here. First of all, you remember in the original game where there were hundreds of shitty little islands that had one Animus fragment on them, and they weren't meaningful to experience, but you also couldn't ignore them if you wanted to be thorough, so you were just having a terrible time either way? In Resynced, those are deleted. They do not exist. Little islands and playas, you usually have no reason to stop at them and walk on them, and their purpose in the world is to basically act as pathing obstructions for your ship and enemy ships, which is still a valuable level design ingredient. It doesn't need to have a worthless little fragment on it to be meaningful. I genuinely applaud the restraint it takes for the team to be like, yeah, so if this isn't fun or meaningful gameplay, literally just don't put it in. If you're ever stopping on an island, it will usually have some kind of gameplay or story purpose. At least a chest or two, a viewpoint, some animals to grab, it may be the site of a contract target, or maybe the breach point into an Animus rift. They also sometimes have new lore notes, tragic or disturbing environmental storytelling, the final resting place of some poor sod who made a bad decision, these kind of things. The other thing is that fragments have been replaced by either keys or files. Keys help you get items from the Animus hub, not that exciting, but files are whole-ass lore files you can just grab, read, listen to, or look at, and because they're world items you physically walk over to pick up, they're not time-gated by anomalies the way the ones in projects are. I really, really like this. My biggest critique of Shadows modern day is how abysmally slow it was to get any narrative unlock progress. It's just not that satisfying. You're constantly waiting. When I was running around the world in Resynced, I'd be doing my map clear, and when I saw one, I would say like a hunter locked onto prey, that's a file, there's a file there, and immediately run to grab and open it. Fragments were stupid because they didn't do anything. Files are exciting to me because I care about Assassin's Creed's modern day narrative. I care about the world outside the Animus and getting glimpses into it, so whenever I see one, it's another glimpse into what's happening in that world. Since failing a tail or eavesdrop no longer causes desync, how organically does the game transition into alternative objectives, like looting a corpse for a note or chasing a target? Are there any moments where you can get a hard fail state on a tail? Broken tails reliably transition into alternate objectives smoothly. Unless I'm forgetting any, I believe there are only 2 moments in the entire game failing to stay in stealth is a hard fail state, one in historical and one in present day or rifts. What makes this adaptability on the game's part so valuable is not just a softening of punishment for shakier stealth players, it's also an improvement to the game's flow when you're replaying it. Tails in many Assassin's Creed games are not terribly interesting once you've already beaten them once, right? They're often a narrative delivery vehicle, an atmosphere or tension builder, but if you already know how to finish one flawlessly, and you already know the story reveals that they'll give when cleared, redoing tails on future playthroughs in every game, even the best ones that have them, like AC2, is always just kind of bad. So the nice thing about adaptive tails for veteran players or those revisiting the game is that they cut downtime. You can just kill the guy and access the location he would have led you to through what's in his pockets or through different means, which means you're spending more of your time in actual gameplay instead of slowly walking around listening to story stuff you've already heard. Think about it like this, you can skip cutscenes and fast advanced dialogue lines, right? Well, killing a tailing target is a lot like skipping a cutscene for a gameplay-minded assassin on a repeat playthrough. It's basically the same thing. You've already experienced this tail, and there's no challenge for you to overcome there anymore. The game is gracious enough to let you move past it. I think that's a brilliant consideration for replayability. More can be done with this idea in future games, like it's not perfect. For example, I think the locations should get meaningfully harder or become more prepared for your arrival, which rarely feels like the case in the game as is, but that would be very cool. Shoutouts to quote-unquote adaptive mission mechanic from AC Unity, by the way. Those who know, you know. This idea isn't new to the series, it's actually from 12 years ago. How well has Resynced accommodated for the removal of minimap and the compass replacing it? Original AC4 was pretty reliant on the minimap, especially for naval tailing. I would say it's accommodated for it alright. Eagle vision and observe tags let you track targets' positions and distance reasonably well, no major issues there. Ship tailing is much more intuitive in terms of enemy ship perceptions, and I never felt like a lack of compass caused me to fail tailing. A lack of minimap, rather. One reason for that is that you can spyglass and then tag or mark ships to track their distance and positions as well, and the rest is just understandable inferencing on the part of the player to not get too close or sail in front of them. Ship detection is also just less aggressive in Resynced than the original, which feels good. It's good for your own preemptive opening assaults on ships in combat too. Overall, I would say the removal of the minimap is pretty painless in this game. I didn't really use it that much in the original game to begin with. How well would you say Resynced works for no HUD gameplay and exploration? Any game that isn't designed on a foundational level to encourage and support it will never work well enough at it for my taste personally. Like, my bar for this is AC1, so you're probably not beating that. For you, it will depend on how resilient you are as a player to being information-starved, in the ways removing modern game UIs would inflict on you. I wouldn't say it's built to support HUDless play out of the box, very few games are, especially modern games. In the case of Resynced, you can selectively toggle on and off different HUD and UI features, so you can remove the specific parts that you don't want, and keep the parts that you feel you need. For example, you can get rid of stuff like screen shake, the colored attack glints on enemies, your own weapon trails, enemy health bars, and I think all of that's pretty great, even if just for presentation's sake. Removing health bars is actually supported in terms of visual affordance and diegesis because defense breaking an enemy will have their hat or wig fall off for a takedown, which goes through their entire health bar anyway, so health is irrelevant visually. Yes, you can metaphorically and somewhat literally snatch your enemy's wigs and then brutally murder the fuck out of them. It's very cool. The exact granularity of effects and UI settings may leave a bit to be desired for some players, depending on how specific and precise you like to get with this stuff, but I think it does it way better than many other games. Being able to hold aim to observe interaction glints like chests, treasures, and objectives through walls certainly helps, but you could get rid of those too if you were really adamant about that. Using your spyglass on different islands and major locations in the sea as you get close to them would reveal the potential ingredients that location has, like chests or contracts and whatnot as well, so that helps too. How do you feel about the removal of full sync objectives and the lack of a mission replay feature? Full syncs are a relic of a design format that used them to formalize optional challenges in a system that was otherwise criticized for being too easy. Full syncs themselves were also criticized for being intrusive though, and annoying in terms of the game's presentation. I think they can be designed smarter, and I would even love to see them return someday with that smarter design. Like if they're only surfaced to you on a replay, the way Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain does it. We have real difficulty modes and harder level design innately in Resynced, so full syncs aren't needed in the same way or for the same purpose. Overall, I'm not sad to see them go away if their design goals of challenging the player can be achieved differently. That said, Resynced does actually have optional objectives specifically in its Assassination and Naval contracts. They reward you extra money if you accomplish them, which speeds up your progression, so they're materially worth doing if you're able to, but can't be safely ignored if they would be tedious or take too long, like if you have to wait around to double assassinate both targets together in certain contracts. Is the game better for choreography than the original? Stealth and or parkour wise? Is it easier to reset attempts? I think it's better in some ways and worse in others. Being able to make manual saves anywhere, for example, means you can actually replay and re-record things the original never easily let you, like some open world activities or locations whose layouts and enemy placements you really like or want to showcase, but wouldn't reset. With this in mind, our manual saves aren't limitless either. I assume we can still only make around 20 of them, just like recent games. I haven't hit that limit myself yet, so I'm not certain, but that's because I've been wary of doing so, and because Black Flag is a shorter, more focused game than Shadows. Reloading a manual save or autosave is also a bit less reliable than hitting restart from checkpoint, and that brings with it the usual issues. So this approach to replaying parts of the game is not always perfect. Mirage was able to add what they called animus sequences after release, which is basically mission replay with optional objectives. That was quite well received by the player base, and I also really love it. I still plan to upload runs of that with every difficulty slider maxed out all the way in Mirage when I'm not drowning under other responsibilities. Black Flag Resynced is a game whose scope and linear gameplay progression may allow for that kind of mission replay functionality to be developed, and I would strongly encourage UB Singapore to please consider adding that in the future. I think your players will love you for it. Are there more cutscenes added in the game compared to the original? Yeah, there are new cutscenes and missions which I usually enjoyed. There are not so many that they become overbearing. It's still the strong core Black Flag story with some extra stuff attached here and there. How different does this version of Black Flag feel from the original? Resynced looks bright, sunny, and clean, while OG had a look of dirt and grime to it. Is the art direction and moody atmosphere intact? It depends. There are many places where I just prefer the visual style and direction of the original game. Maybe I just struggle to let go of that personally. Maybe it legitimately does look better in the original, especially in daytime context like you allude to. But where Resynced is superior for me is anything that involves nighttime, the glow of torches and lamplight, extreme weather like dense fog, especially dark, cloudy storms at night in naval missions. All of that is far more breathtaking and visually impressive to me than it was in the original. With some exceptions, Resynced also lets us skip time to nighttime whenever we please without any reloads, cheats, or settings, so if you want to explore the Caribbean at night very extensively, Resynced provides that very smoothly. Just have Kenway zone out and stare off into space for a few hours and sneak around in the Nocturne. Are there any new outfits or weapons that you were able to see? There are some new weapons, but what makes a difference and feels fresh is that all weapons, including existing ones, have traits now that give them special behaviors, like being able to parry gunshots, heal you on takedowns, damage nearby enemies when you kill someone, and so on. So, swapping is sometimes meaningful and changes your gameplay in interesting or helpful ways, at least until you find the one that you realize works for you in every situation, and want to stick with it until you get bored. You can make any weapon look like any other weapon you've unlocked, so fashion-minded players should be alright. There are fewer new outfits and new weapons, but there are some. Outfits are mostly beautiful recreations of ones from the original game, and unless they break something by the time you're listening to this, the cloth physics on most of them are really, really nice. Resynced also features trinket slots, which are the final aspect of equipment customization that alters play, and the reason this is valuable is because it makes outfit selection kinder to fashion-minded players too. In the original game, outfits had special gameplay properties, and if you wore something else, you would lose that property. In this game, outfits are purely cosmetic, but whenever you unlock one, you also get its trinket that now carries the gameplay perk that outfit used to give in the original game. For example, when you get the Mayan armor, the first Civ armor, the outfit itself is just a cosmetic, but the trinket that comes with it is what deflects bullets for you if you equip it, just like the outfit itself did back in 2013. What this lets you do is wear the trinket with, say, your assassin robes, so you get to have a hood on while deflecting bullets at the same time, something that was not possible in the original. It's comfy. Is there fall damage in the game? There is, but it's often pretty minimal, and you can roll to mitigate a lot of it from what feels like extreme heights. The distance you can fall without dying is pretty generous, and if you hold the input to roll as you slam the ground, the distance you can fall without even taking damage is also pretty generous. Falling off a mast during shipboarding after you've cut a flag and landing on the deck will kill you very often. Because of this, and because I didn't trust the precision of parkour enough, I actually just always dive into water and climb back onto the ship now. I just don't take the risk. Do you prefer the parkour in this remake or the original? So, I honestly struggle to say. There are things I like about each one. In the original game, I can fall off any surface directly to the next available flat surface, even plummeting all the way to street level from a rooftop if I want to by running at an edge and holding drop. But in Resynced, I didn't find a way to do this. Which makes sense, there isn't really a modifier button you can hold to force that behavior. To many players this will seem like a minor thing, but to me, this is a unique aspect of what makes Kenway Parkour feel different than every other system. And because I like to do things in every AC game that make them feel unique from the others, when I play Black Flag Original, I use this a lot. On the other hand, the extremely strict wall run cancel windows in the original game are no more. If you are able to jump away from a wall, Resynced will let you do it at any point during the wall run animation. I really appreciate that. That feels so good. Resynced also starts with free jump being toggled on by default in the initial options setup, and it lets you toggle on advanced parkour from the get-go, which was nice to see. I have problems with the advanced parkour toggle in this game. I found it to be pretty buggy at times, but this will hopefully be fixed either by the time you listen to this or sometime shortly after. But yeah, like manual jumps available from the beginning, just amazing. Is it true you can cancel wall run to eject? Is it back? Yes, you can, provided you have something valid to eject or jump to begin with. Unless advanced parkour is toggled, in which case you should be able to jump to void even if there's nothing to target once they fix up the bugs with it. How do the wall run cancels feel? They feel pretty good. I kind of dislike the way modern Assassin's Creed parkour feels in general, so I have a bias and disposition toward being a bit harsh on it, but these are nice. Other creators might feel differently. I encourage you to check out other players' thoughts and videos whenever one of these games comes out and see what everybody has to say, not just me. If you follow this channel though, you know what I like and you know what my standards are. This still doesn't quite meet those. It's much better than the worst, but it hasn't dethroned the best. Can you dive into a swing like in Unity? I'm not sure. Maybe. I never did it myself, so I'm curious about this too. Does parkour feel more like Shadows or Mirage with both of their updates? Do you think they would do post-launch improvements to parkour if needed? I think post-launch improvements, if warranted and highly requested, are not only possible but actually likely, which is something that's very convenient about the modern era of Assassin's Creed game development. Once upon a time, if parkour was bad, it would be guaranteed to be bad forever, or until modders came to save us. Nowadays, we can ask for improvements, and we have a decent chance of actually getting them. As for how parkour feels, it is a very strange hybrid of Mirage and Shadows. The control scheme and overall architecture of the world makes parkour evoke big Mirage vibes, but the way input response, animation handling, and where it lands on the spectrum of stiffness and fluidity is a bit closer to Shadows. Binding sprint to left stick click will always feel bad, even with remapping, because the game's foundation is working off of default parameters that take account of sprint being a toggled state instead of a held modifier, which causes various issues and makes certain gameplay impossible and other stuff like that. An upgrade or a downgrade from AC Mirage post-parkour updates? I'm not confident to make a definitive assertion either way, but I will say I personally find Mirage parkour a little more comfortable currently. Is this the best parkour has felt since Unity? When watching the gameplay showcases, it looked kind of floaty. I think the scale of architecture in these games will always entail a level of floatiness, but what I can praise is that the speed at which Edward moves through hop chains or sequences of multiple back-to-back jumps through objects is fast and smooth. This is a concept I've kind of wanted to talk about for a while. When you think back across the entire series, when did Assassin's Creed start to get floaty? If you're truly honest with yourself, you'll understand that the beginning of this was actually Unity. And when you question why, one possible reason for it is the bigger one-to-one scale of the game world. That necessitated the player character be able to make longer, bigger jumps in order to successfully interact with all of these objects in all of this geo, whereas someone like Altair in AC1's world was constructed primarily with concerns about gameplay, not scale recreation. Resynced obviously isn't Unity, and isn't always attempting any scale in particular, but the way these games probably program and handle character controllers, underlying input, the way animations and behaviors bridge from one object to another, I don't know, I just feel like we never saw this kind of floatiness with games that were focused on constructing gameplay-capable worlds as opposed to realistic-looking or realistically scaled ones. So to some extent, all ACs released after 2014 suffer from this, and as such, I've gotten tired of caring about it. This is how it is. Maybe one day it won't be. Now, let's mention the good parts. Anything involving forward movement, jumping from one object to another and the like is all good. Where I start to get cranky and frustrated is things involving vertical movement, anything about climbing straight up a building or optimizing reaching high ground from street level. Everything from Origins up to today hasn't felt great to me in that regard at all, and part of it is just that while ejects do gain height, their targeting is still not AC1 tier. Hell, it's probably not even Unity tier. And the responsiveness and how reliably I can input one isn't always AC1 tier either, though I will say Resynced has pretty reliable ejects. I understand that this seems strict and extreme to some players overall, but that's my honesty, that's the bar for me. My personal standard is AC1 to Rev, and anything that doesn't meet that will always let me down one way or another. Your thoughts may differ. Are diagonal wall runs back? I don't think so. Does camera-relativity apply to manual jumps on NSOs as well, like on controller and keyboard? I would say yes, but with an asterisk. It still doesn't feel like I'm guaranteed to exit an object like a beam at all, or at the exact vector I point my camera at and hold forward in when I jump, but it definitely seems more likely and somewhat more reliable than some previous games. Is this upgraded version of the Anvil parkour a serviceable system for upcoming games, especially potential remakes like AC1 and AC2? They would deal with city-focused environments. Does it feel too restrictive and need to be reworked more to do those games justice? So if it stays this way, then absolutely not. There is no hope at all. I believe we would need a reworked foundational parkour system instead of this 10-year-old foundation that started in Origins. To understand why, you can watch the video I recently released where I talk about why L3 toggle sprint is not good enough, why a single button governing forward and upward movement is also terrible for the player's control and precision. If they were going to remake games like AC1, AC2 and whatnot, games which are significantly denser, more urban, games which have a much higher focus on granular, precise movement through cityscapes than a game like Black Flag or even a game like Mirage, honestly. I think we need a held and released modifier button, like a trigger or shoulder. Toggle sprint, even existing as a foundation, rots and destroys the movement system's possibilities, because the devs have to take into consideration that the default average player will never swap off of it, and cannot responsively use that button to split and modify states or inputs, so it basically has to do nothing. It's also a boogeyman or a specter that hides the part that actually matters. It doesn't actually do anything, like I just said, it just distracts you from the fact that upward and forward movement are governed by a single button, which is buckling under the weight of all the states it's being forced to access on its own. With a held and released modifier button, holding accesses certain states, and filters blocks out or makes impossible other unwanted states. Releasing does the same, but in the inverse. It is inherently greater control, precision, and speed than having a single button, while also letting the player fail and make mistakes in more interesting ways. It adds a kind of fundamental and intrinsic challenge to the game that is, agnostic of an enemy detecting you or, you taking health bar damage. It makes engaging with the environment itself interesting, which I think is valuable. It's something that games should probably aim for. Adding a nearly cosmetic sprint function over top of that one-button control scheme doesn't do anything but obfuscate what's really going on, and no amount of remapping will change that. So as much as it's very adorable whenever I hear hundreds of players ask, like, hey, Rogue, like, can we remap things to be like the original control scheme? I always just kind of smile sadly at them while a tear rolls down my face, because it's like, you poor creatures, like, it doesn't matter. Like, it's not gonna really make a difference, right? A held and released modifier button is also itself state agnostic, meaning you can hold or release it while you're moving, standing still, on a wall, on an object, in water, in midair. Like, it won't always do something, but it's easy for your hand to access anytime, and that matters. How is stealth overall compared to Shadows and Mirage? Is the level design better than the original game? The level design is certainly better than the original game. Almost every mission has some interesting change, whether that's subtle or entire new areas, and with multiple difficulty levels, there's even some variance in how you get to experience it this time. Obviously, playing an area on easy is going to feel way faster and zippier, and very different from playing it on hard, having to be careful even when you're above people, for example. Mirage and Shadows both turned out to be pretty enjoyable games to stay stealthy in for different reasons. Resynced is also great for me. The biggest difference is that Edward is a much better fighter than Basim and Naue, and this changes the consequence equation because it makes stealth significantly more optional. It kind of pushes the game back into feeling more like classic Assassin's Creed. In Mirage, you could sneak around very quickly and reset back into stealth as soon as you were detected. You were a monster in stealth with how quickly you could take out mass groups of enemies, but you were intentionally weak in combat. It was very Unity flavored. In Shadows, staying in stealth itself was the difficult part, and how good you were in combat was largely a factor of how much effort you put into the build crafting, the RPG layer. Naue could still blow people up a fair bit if she had done her mid-game or late-game progression, but that said, provided you're not rushing and take your time more than Basim needs to, Naue also has a lot of verbs that help her stay in stealth, including prone and the shadows the game is named after. She does not have comparatively many verbs to help her recover it, the biggest ones being smoke and just running away. Edward Kenway in Resynced has access to this kind of swashbuckler stealth where you'll scrap a little here and there, think on your feet, do a bit of combat against two guys, get back into some bushes onto rooftops, and that just feels great here. On normal, stealth feels similar to Black Flag 2013. You can SSI trick people into bushes by uncrouching and crouching back into them to pull them over. You can sleep or berserk people, you can whistle them over and take them out. You can climb roofs to air assassinate or double assassinate people. All of that's in the game. Resynced though, and especially on hard, adds some extra texture to the experience. So if you get into a fight against one or two guys, they're not going to inform the entire area of your exact position. That means you can kill them quickly. You can end up having multiple short fights, little pockets of conflict that don't destabilize the whole area. The thing is, the fastest way you have to kill an enemy during a short skirmish is to crack them in the chest with a pistol quickshot, then hit your takedown button to hit and blade them instantly. They'll be dead and you'll get back to sneaking, but it'll make noise and put question marks over other guards' heads. Now they're curious. They come looking at what they just heard. This emphasizes constantly moving around, thinking, staying mobile, repositioning. You also get the rope dart very early in this game, and once you do, it honestly just changes everything, but I'll talk about that later. On a scale from 1 to 10, how much of a stealth game is Black Flag Resynced? I'm mainly curious how the stealth holds up against other games in the franchise, and how often stealth gameplay occurs through the main story. Maybe like an 8, I would say, minding again that how you tune your difficulty will affect this. Just like in the original Black Flag, you can actually clear most parts of the game without being detected if you want to and you're good enough, which is something some players still don't realize about that game. However, just like the original game, there are certainly some moments of scripted combat. Assassin's Creed is about both stealth and action, and this combat system is one of the good reasons to play Resync, so that feels reasonable. There aren't too many moments of forced combat though, only when it makes sense in the story. Even when you let yourself get caught, it's very smooth to get back into stealth right away most of the time, provided you avoid the temptation to just kill everyone. Does the light mechanic from Shadows make a meaningful difference, or is it just a gimmick that was ported over? So this one I am not so sure about. There were absolutely moments where it felt like it mattered, but I also had many moments where it didn't seem to do anything, so it's hard to say. I'm just one player, my experiences ended up being inconclusive either way on hard mode. When the game comes out and all the day one players get to try it out and post about it online, we'll probably have some more real information after that. Does the lighting system from Shadows feel like an afterthought, or is it as intuitively integrated into the game and level design? This feels like an extension of the previous question, so I'll put it right after. And I guess I'll just answer the other side of it. What I will say is that I'm really glad they're still using the weather and lighting systems created and programmed for this engine and workflow while developing Shadows. It just makes open world lighting and shadowing really atmospheric and enjoyable to be in. While questionable how much it affects real gameplay here, it affected my enjoyment of some of the game's important moments immensely. The way lanterns cast their glows on objects and vegetation around them at night, the way moonlight reflects off the slick deck of the Jackdaw. I don't know, I'm not really a graphics guy, but this shit just gets me. Plus, it feels good to be able to skip to nighttime and play around that way whenever I want. Certain missions as well, like the Siege of Charlestown, dude, that mission is crazy with this engine, these visuals, these graphics. Can you preemptively hold the button to assassinate an enemy on the first possible frame like in the OG? You cannot, but since Assassinate is the interact button instead of attack, you can just mash it while approaching an enemy and you'll get a very similar thing. I will say there is a bit of a strange delay in your Assassinate input being accepted and going through, and Edward actually smoothly closing the distance and killing the guy. It feels like, I don't know, I wish that was a lot swifter and smoother. Can you still lean on corners in corner Assassinate? Yes, you can. You can even stand lean or crouch lean, and there are different stances and animations for both of them. I don't think that really does anything, but it is a very cool detail. Will an assassination during a slow walk preference towards subtler animations in their library? Do the kill animations come off as too flashy in general? I did get the sense that slower or closer range assassination presses did bias towards shorter, sneakier stabs, yeah. Many of them are actually Arno's low-profile animations from Unity. Very cool to see and almost makes me suspicious of some future possibilities. Kill animations honestly didn't come off as too flashy for me, even the combat ones. There seems to be an overall value on animations that resolve quickly in this game, which I really appreciated. How do the assassination animations feel? Are they fast? They feel pretty good for the most part, barring that delay I talked about between, like, you press the assassinate button, you watch the prompt on the screen vanish, so it means the game has accepted and read your input already, but then much of the time Edward will kind of very slowly walk toward the guard while you have no control, and it just feels a bit strange. I don't know. I'm not sure why that happens. It doesn't really happen in other games, so it's just interesting to think about. But yeah, like, animations are typically pretty fast. Especially noteworthy is the animation for assassinating or taking down an enemy while you're inside a bush or stalking zone. Edward just yeets his ass back into the foliage at surprising speed. The first few times I saw it, I almost wanted to be like, wait, isn't that a little too fast? But it grew on me very quickly, and when you end up doing that animation like hundreds of times, you'll be grateful it's so quick. Do Berserk and Sleep Darts function the same as the original game, or have they been rebalanced? Using Berserk's delete guard AI was a trick I learned from you in Unity, and I had a wonderful time applying it to the original Black Flag. They do function pretty much the same as the original game, yeah. The difference is that you have to act a little faster. So you can very much still Berserk someone for a brief stun into a stealth kill, but you have to take advantage of that state much faster, because guards essentially convert into their Berserk state much faster in this game than Black Flag Original or Unity. But also the rope dart is there for you to do kind of the same thing now. Like, it sort of has a very similar function. If you're around a wall or behind a bush, you can just quick use your rope dart to, pull someone in with you and then kill them. So it's kind of up to you. Like, do you want to Berserk stun people for the stab, or do you want to, like, rope dart pull people for the stab? How much is social stealth and advanced movement viable here in comparison to the originals and that iteration of the Anvil engine and the more recent games like Mirage? How much does social stealth actually play a role in mission design? I'm gonna break your heart and basically give a thumbs down to both. Social stealth is not very present and not very important to this game, and advanced movement is still not much better than what we've seen in the last few games. It is smoother, it feels better, but there's still just, like, not much substance to it. So that kind of puts both on par with the original Black Flag in my experience, for the most part. If you've gone back and played Black Flag recently, you'd kind of know that both of these things are sort of absent or de-emphasized, and Resync doesn't do too much to change that. There are dancers you can hire, but they're typically far from any useful main story or side content locations, and by the time you reach one with them following you around, you'll notice that they've probably stopped following you around. There are drunk pirates you can hire that will fight people, but this too isn't super helpful because fighting people is something Edward is already godlike at, and it doesn't unlock new possibilities the way being blended in a group of dancers would if it was actually useful. Social stealth really doesn't play much of a role in the mission design. I looked for opportunities to use it, and it really only came into play twice throughout my playthrough, and that was with me trying to find places to use it. Maybe I'm just bad. Always a possibility. You let me know how you find it when you play. Is there blend fade time? No. And if there is, it's so short that you can't involve it in gameplay strategy. Do we have to press a button to hide in wells and on benches? In the original, it was super easy to walk up and just instantly blend by pathing into an interactable like that. So you do have to press a button to sit on benches, yes. Wells, hiding doors, haystacks, and blending into crowds seems to happen just by moving into them, but there aren't that many places where that's meaningful. Do you think they should have reintroduced high and low profile? All the assassination animations seem like they are treated as high profile, and I don't like it one bit. I always think Assassin's Creed should reintroduce high and low profile. It's been nearly 20 years, and they still haven't made a control scheme better suited to these kinds of characters who have to operate in dense urban environments. So it boggles the mind. As for how assassinations are treated, it's based on your movement speed usually, but it's still a bit random. Do you feel from this project that current AC developers understand or prioritize social stealth as well as they do parkour as of late? I do not. Do double assassinations still have the hard camera cut, or do they finally get rid of it? They still have the hard camera cut, yes. Does Eagle Vision work similarly to the original, or has it been replaced by the observe mechanic from Shadows? Both? I'm saying that because Eagle Vision and Shadows already worked very similarly to Black Flag when you think about it. You could, first see people through walls by turning it on, and then mark and tag them with observe to keep track of their position in real time after you turn it off. Resynced works the exact same way as Shadows in that regard. The difference is that in Black Flag, enemies you tagged in Eagle Vision would have their entire silhouette glowing through walls permanently, whereas in Resynced you only get the little arrow tags. You need to toggle Eagle Vision back on from time to time to confirm their facing or exact depth and distance from you. We do get the observe mechanic though, and it's just as good as it was in Shadows. Use it to tag people, use it to find objectives, use it to find treasure or collectibles. It's smooth and convenient. Is the stealth enemy AI any good? Can they look up like in Shadows? Do they remain on patrol mode if you're spotted? On hard, the stealth enemy AI is pretty sharp. They can look up, and certain guard archetypes like gate guards or static guards seem to have sight ranges that are insane on hard. They will go back to their natural behaviors pretty quickly after you're detected though, which for a fast-paced game like this one is understandable, so you can go back to picking them off or moving through them after recovering your stealth state. Will guards ring alarms when they find bodies? Do they parkour after you while chasing like in the old games? Guards will not ring alarms when they find bodies, which I'm not sure how I feel about. If I'm playing on hard already, maybe it's fine to make this be a behavior, and punish the player a little more for leaving corpses out in the open. In Assassin's Creed, there's basically very little gameplay reason not to leave bodies littered about, other than if you just want to roleplay an even more elusive type of killer. On the other hand, I did experience them trying to parkour after me, chase me, and fight me, even if I went for higher ground to escape from time to time. I don't know if they can chase you to all kinds of heights and buildings, but they did chase me up some. I'm curious about the combat. For me, AC Odyssey is the best of the RPG era in terms of responsiveness and hit feedback. I know your playstyle, Leo, is to avoid open combat, but where would you put Resynced on the scale of responsive and arcadey on one side versus animation heavy on the other side? Resynced is definitely leaning more responsive, smoother, and arcadey, rather than sluggish and over-animated. There's still a bit of that from time to time, but it's definitely the kind of combat system with more animation cancelling, more button presses per minute than some previous games, if you're fighting well and killing quickly. It's not an RPG though. You can probably have the weakest equipment in the game, slap a guard at the end of the game with a gunshot, and hit and blade him immediately unless he's a boss or something. When you break an enemy's defense, you open them to a takedown. Does Edward use his hidden blades in any of those? Edward uses hidden blades for most of those, in fact. The amount of times he'll use anything other than his hidden blades to do a takedown animation was quite small in my experience, but maybe that's just the way I fought. Do you think hidden blade combat's existence matters? I do, I really do, but only if it can be made somehow mechanically unique from other weapons. In Assassin's Creed 1, this was done the best, because you couldn't block with it, and you couldn't attack anyone except a target with their guard down, or they would catch your arm and stop you. Likewise, any successful counter you landed with a hidden blade in AC1 was always instantly lethal, 100% of the time, even on the final boss. But this was balanced by it being a very risky and difficult execution check. The hidden blade isn't just a cool alternate weapon, it's something that carries its own entirely unique gameplay benefits and disadvantages. That's the kind of thing I would look for when it comes to hidden blade combat in any Assassin's Creed game. I wouldn't be impressed by it just being exactly like my main weapon, but with different animations. That said, if that's what they have to do, I would take it, because I believe being able to use your hidden blade in every scenario is something that makes assassins, or even protagonists in the Assassin's Creed universe, unique compared to other video games. Think about it. Thousands of video games have boring generic weapons like swords and guns. Only Assassin's Creed has hidden blades. How does it feel to express yourself through combat? Does the game actively push you to express yourself with its difficulty, or how satisfying its systems are, or do you have to experiment of your own volition? It generally feels pretty good. There's less variety in the flashy and interesting things I can do than I was expecting, but it's focused and fast, which I really value. You feel very lethal in the way I always say assassins should feel. The game did actively push me to fight well for a while, especially on hard, in part because my Edward was not very upgraded, but this is something that actually starts to fade when you craft him to be too strong. I recommend not upgrading your health bar, and maybe only getting one extra pistol holster, so that you have to keep making good decisions while fighting throughout the entire game. I almost wish the game would stop you from upgrading Edward too far for the point in the main story you're at, because once I got all my upgrades done, I realized there was nothing stopping me from just quickshot hidden blading the entire Caribbean soldiery that stood in my way. On the bright side, this does mean you get this interesting evolution of Edward Kenway, where he fights with his swords more at the beginning of the game, and then kills with his pistols, kills with his rope dart, and kills with his hidden blades more by the end of the game. You go from fighting to killing, and if you like that kind of ludonarrative shift or find it cool, you'll probably be fine with the combat and upgrade system. I think it can be pretty interesting from that perspective. Will the combat be able to carry the length of the game? It seems like there's room for creativity, but does it actually facilitate interesting decision making? I don't know. No, it depends. I think some players will grow bored of it eventually, but I had fun throughout as I learned to kill quicker and quicker. And the really nice thing about a combat system like this is that it's really fast, right? Like, the reason that's such a major advantage compared to other games is that in other games, when you get bored of combat, you still have to slog through the slowness of it because enemies have thick health bars. But in Resynced, by the time you've experienced most of what combat has to offer, you will have enough bullets and gunshots available to just either instantly hit and blade or blow the head smooth off anything coming at you. Do double tool kills make a comeback? I don't think so, but if you get an enemy's health low enough and then do a pistol quickshot on them in melee range, you will barrel stuff the gun into their mouth and pull the trigger in a special finisher animation. The way you get that is basically, if they would die from a single gunshot, you use your pistol quickshot button in melee. Also, double counter kills are here if you parry two enemies and take their defense gauges away close together. Is the musket still usable? How about picking up enemy weapons or throwing knives? You cannot pick up any weapons, including knives, muskets, or enemy swords. Everything you're going to use is on your character, other than the occasional powder keg. To compensate for that, the rope dart is infinite now and has several different ways to use it. It's good for both stealth and combat. Do you think the game is harmed by removing weapon choices, unarmed combat, disarming enemies, etc.? For role-playing, sure, but in terms of real gameplay, honestly, I'm not sure. As I've grown older and experienced more video games, visual variety on my weapons alone does not impress me or feel fun for me anymore the way that it used to when I was younger. The weapon choices, the unarmed combat, disarming enemies, that stuff didn't really do a whole lot in the original game. It was cool, some archetypes could be countered by fighting them that way, but at the end of the day, I think that's a lot of effort for something that doesn't actually make much difference. Two different weapons in a Devil May Cry game, a Souls game, a Ninja Gaiden, or even many shooters, even two different prosthetics in something like Sekiro behave completely differently and give you access to different strategies. But in Black Flag 2013, two different weapons don't change how I'm gonna play. I'm still gonna kill enemies exactly the same way. A musket isn't meaningfully different from dual swords and a pistol shot. Because of that, I would rather they spend the time on making actual gameplay variation in other ways. In Resync's case, weapons have different traits which do alter your available decisions. Not to a huge extent, but more than the original game. If I'm running alter swords which heal me on combat takedowns, and I'm missing some health, I might want to rope dart sweep a lone guard into a bush and hit him with a ground takedown to heal myself instead of doing a normal assassination. This creates a strategic choice. Do I want to kill him quietly but get nothing? Or do I want to use my weapon's unique mechanic to help myself, but make more noise and have to discard my positioning? If there are other guards too close to him, maybe I should temporarily sleep dart the other one in order to open up that tactic for myself before he wakes back up. Tactics like that are what's cool to me nowadays, not whether my animations look cosmetically different. I understand why it may be a loss for some players, but that's my perspective. It just doesn't excite me the same way. Now, If they could add hidden blade combat and have that behave entirely differently from swords, I think shit like that would be awesome. Maybe the parry button does something completely differently. Maybe we take double damage for deciding to fight with them, but we're way more deadly. Maybe defending ourselves is harder and dodging and spacing becomes suddenly way more important, since right now, perfect dodges are underused in the combat sandbox compared to other buttons. I would love to see something like that. Can we take our swords and put them away while not in combat? We used to be able to draw swords then sheath them. Can we do that here? Same with a hidden blade. You can sheathe and unsheathe your swords whenever you want by holding your HUD button. Hidden blades, yeah, there's no ejecting and retracting your hidden blade like whenever you want. That hasn't been a thing in the games since Rogue, I think. How do abilities work? Do you expend a resource? I hope not. There are no resources except ammo. To use a special action, you hold R2 and press a face button, the same controls as Shadows. This includes pistol, shot, rope dart, pull, kick, and sweep, and you can do those anytime as much as you want. The rope dart has a very short cooldown, so you can't spam it immediately right after itself, but other than that, yeah. Do you think you can fight with the entire HUD off? Can you tell the attacks apart without the blue or red glints? You can certainly fight with the entire HUD off. You can usually tell attacks apart without the blue and red glints, but it will take you some practice to recognize them. First, some enemies will only have normal attacks, and some enemies will only have unblockables. Brutes, for example, do not have any normals. Grunts or regulars do not have any unblockables. Elites and agiles can have both normals and unblockables, so learning their animations will become important for you. Or you can use the fact that they can hit you with these kind of mix-ups to make them more valuable targets for yourself to aggressively clear the screen of before they can do their more ambiguous combat behaviors and hurt you with them. That adds more value to your pistol bullets and keeping an eye out for those enemies in combat. Incoming gunshots from off-screen can be troublesome to deal with, but again, that just means you have more reasons to stay aware of your surroundings, keep tabs on your environment, and make sure you get rid of them. How smooth are the combat animations? Do they transition better between each other than the original? Assassin's Creed animations starting from the original Black Flag and every other game after have never looked that good, smooth, or cleanly flowing to me. Am I crazy? Maybe I was already too used to better animated and better responsive games by that point in my life. AC3 to me was the last game to really care about good animation that didn't constantly break, disjoint, or disconnect from paired entities in weird ways. It got especially bad in Unity, where Arno would oftentimes stab or hit the air, or do a throat or head stab on the enemy's arm, or other immersion breaking shit like that. You can still see moments like this in so many Unity videos on YouTube, even right now. So, in this regard, I would say Black Flag Resynced is way more successful than some games, but opinions may vary. Overall, though, I would say animations in this game are generally good. Like, they kind of try to be in the middle of, like, they look good, but they also feel good to press. How do the tools feel? Any new tech or innovations with them? Tools feel good in this game. The rope dart can be manually and freely aimed to strike any nearby point in the environment with extreme precision. You may be tempted to undervalue this characteristic, but you must understand it has extreme implications on the player's strength in any given stealth environment. It can disable alarm bells without being next to them. That makes enough noise to lure someone for a kill, sleep, or ghost. The rope dart can also be heard by enemies when it hits surfaces close enough. And because rope dart doesn't consume any ammo, you have an infinitely reusable throwing knife on a string that you can throw at walls, torches, alarm bells, and most helpful of all, actual enemies for whatever purpose you like. Rope dart lets you pull gunners off their towers without climbing up to them. Similarly, lets you get extended stealthy ledge assassinations on people without actually having to be on that ledge yourself. It lets you yank people toward you and assassinate them. I'm so excited, I'm slurring my words. If you're crouched in a bush and you rope an enemy toward yourself, they will not detect you. They'll just investigate in your direction. So it's a safe way to lure individual enemies. Rope dart lets you do cheeky projectile one-twos using a sleep dart on one guy, then a rope dart quick use on the guy right beside him, keeping them both controlled until they're hidden bladed. This one tool, by itself, has enough cool stuff you can do with it, and is so available in so many situations that it defines the stealth experience for me in this game. If you've always loved the rope dart, but you wish you could just use it more, or wished it was more integrated into core gameplay, that's one of the awesome things this game does. Throwable smoke bombs are in this game too, and you can chuck one at some enemies, assassinate into the cloud, then immediately leave before others see what's happened. Or use them to genuinely cut lines of sight so you can easily cross spaces or prevent someone from seeing you in hard mode, like if you're on rooftops or need to get to the other side of a street or plantation field. Also, smoke bombs can be ignited by shooting them, so don't shoot if you're in smoke, but likewise, you can throw smoke at enemies and shoot to burn them. Is Edward an assassin earlier in the story due to him getting rope darts so early in Resynced? He is not, but he does receive them from a character who makes sense having them, which I thought was a very smart narrative choice. So like the core story of the game is unchanged. It's just things are touched here and there to like create a slightly different experience and make certain gameplay things available more. Does rope dart still have the choke ability if you pull someone and they get stuck on waist-high objects? What about throwing them to the sides like the harpoon from Valhalla? No, rope darts are always a one-directional harsh pull action toward yourself. If the enemy slams into an object while that's happening, they'll be defense broken or fall to the ground as if kicked into a wall, and you can do a takedown or assassination on them then. Can't throw enemies to the side either. To do that, you would want to position yourself properly for a kick. Can the blowpipe be toggled visually? Sometimes it ruins the vibe. As far as I can tell, it cannot be. Can you quick use or quick shot with tools without having to free aim them? You can quick use pistols, the rope dart, and smoke bombs. Blowpipe darts do have to be aimed. Makes sense when you consider they are very strong and completely silent. Have improvements from AC Rogue made their way into Resynced, like for example enemy ships boarding you? As far as I can tell, enemy ships will never board you, but the way swivel guns work in Rogue has been brought over, so having to aim at weak points manually. It's pretty satisfying. I like the change. The general feel of naval combat is also more maneuverable, swifter, and more agile, but this applies to your enemies too though, especially on hard. Enemy ship archetypes will now have consistent behaviors too, like schooners tend to drop a lot of fire barrels, brigs will use their superior speed to try to ram you, things of that nature. These behaviors, even when they existed in the original game, were not so noticeable, whereas in this game they really are. Has Ubisoft improved the ship progression, where you have to collect resources in order to progress through the main story? There are really only 1 or 2 objectives that demand you upgrade your ship in order to unlock access to a mission or finish a mission, but it's still wise to stay on top of your ship upgrades anyway. The resource curve seems smoother in this game than the original. If you want to cheese ship progression a little bit, you can also set naval difficulty down to normal or easy, which places less strain on your jackdaw overall. Or in waters guarded by enemy ships, you can jump off your ship and swim to the shore or onto the enemy ship themselves. Helps that there are no loading screens between cities in the sea anymore too. What are your thoughts on the naval alt-fire or secondary weapon modes? I like them all. They're all useful and they all have mutually exclusive purposes. I recommend unlocking as many as you can, and they did a good job with making your first one be heated shot, which does much more damage than round shot, but has a much shorter range, while still being aimable. So it's not like the blind-fired heavy shot either. All the weapons and alt-fires fit into their own niche. Do naval officers actually make a difference, and are their stories interesting? They do, I must say, especially if you plan to take down the legendary ships. I suggest you get every naval officer's gameplay effect for your jackdaw. Their stories are short, and to my taste, very interesting. Some scenes look and feel better than others, but I think the later parts of all 3 of their stories are quite cool. Lucy's is a story of satisfying vengeance, the Padre is an archetype I always love, the priest who takes up his old violent ways one more time, and Deadman Smith turned out to be my favorite. He has a very sad, very quiet and grim outlook on existence and life, and everything that came out of his mouth had mad aura. I don't want to say much about him because a lot of it is a spoiler, but I hope you like him too. Those are all the questions that got to me in time for Black Flag Resynced. I will be covering the game more. Check out the channel and take a look at my other videos as well whenever they come out, like my recommendations for things you should do when you play, my in-depth thoughts on the game, and my eventual rope dart discussion and guide. Thanks for watching. May fog shroud you, may stars light your way, and may the night keep you safe.